This was about 6 months ago, in the summer in the southern hemisphere. Here I tend to order a fair bit of pizza. Since hunger is a thing, pizza is pretty much my only option for delivery. And since I don't have a car, I can't drive to get something myself. I'm the kind of girl who doesn't wear pants if I don't have to, even if the weather is 25 degrees. No pants for me. I have one pair of shorts that I love to wear, but I only ever wear it around the house. Obviously, I put those on as I was expecting a pizza delivery person, and I couldn't exactly just open the door in my underwear. I opened the door and accepted the pizza and began to eat my dinner. Not too long into my meal, though, I got a message on my phone. I've deleted the messages since, of course, but in the first message, this sender called me by my name. That was pretty strange, as anyone who knew me referred to me by my nickname. They asked if I was home alone with a winking face. Okay, well, this was pretty creepy. Who exactly was this person? Between me asking who on earth this could be and how they'd gotten my number, probably a mistake on my part. They began to describe exactly what I was wearing. I started to get a horrible, sinking feeling. This person had my number, my name, and knew exactly how I was dressed. I realized the only way they could possibly know this is if they were the guy who just delivered my pizza. I had to use my name and number to order, and if that was the case, this person also knew where I lived. I put the number into Google and checked the first few results that came up. I saw the person was a local, and I had actually seen this person around before as well. Realizing they were in my part of town was the worst part, as they were in the perfect position to stalk, harass me, or continue to be creepy. I drew up all the blinds, crawled into bed, and pretty much made myself into a blanket burrito. I stayed as still as I could for a few hours. I was scared out of my wits. They did keep trying to contact me over the next few days, but luckily I didn't hear from the person again after threatening them with police action. So I work at a pizza place, usually inside, as my insurance does not cover claims when driving for business. Occasionally I will cover a delivery shift for one of the drivers though, because the money is pretty good. The delivery area includes a few new developments in upper middle class cookie cutter neighborhoods, an older 1940s village, 2 apartment complexes, some trailer parks, and a bunch of more rural areas. Not exactly to the point of seeing hundreds of stars at night or anything, but enough that you couldn't hear your neighbors if they were yelling. About a week ago, I was covering for one of these shifts. I come back to the shop feeling pretty good. I was averaging $5 a delivery, and they'd all been pretty close as well. I checked to see if we had any more outgoing deliveries. All of a sudden, I saw an address I had never seen before. We mostly only had regular customers, so an address that didn't seem the least bit familiar was somewhat out of the ordinary. It was out on one of those more rural roads. I asked the kid who'd taken the order what was up, because there was a special instruction on the ticket as well. He said the person who called said to go around back because the front door, I guess, was inoperational for some reason. Okay, well, that wasn't uncommon. People often want you to go around the back. Either they're painting the front door, the house is shifted and it's a hassle to open, or they just like hanging out in their backyard. Whatever. So as I'm driving out to this house, I get an odd feeling. I really didn't like the idea of going to the back of some house way out in the sticks. It would be all too easy for some thugs to order a pizza to an abandoned house. There are quite a few of those in the more rural areas. Then they jumped the delivery guy, obviously. I figured I'd scope the place out a bit when I got there first. If it seemed too sketchy, I'd just call them and make up some bullcrap about how it's against company policy to go around the back of houses to prevent robberies. As I'm driving up, I realize it's toward the end of this road that gets less and less populated the further down you went. Great. I was pretty near the address now, and I started to slow down. I came upon this house, an abandoned-looking building set up from the road with no address and surrounded by a bunch of trees. I thought to myself, this house better not be it. I drive past and check the next house's address, and lo and behold, the abandoned-looking one with no number seemed to be the right house. Well, fuck this. At this point, I was not super worried, though. Out in the boonies. The standards of houses are pretty low, so a house in disrepair is not too unusual. I doubled back to this house and pulled into the driveway. I started getting bad vibes immediately. Something didn't feel right. I parked my car at the very end of the driveway with the rear of the car on the shoulder, so anyone passing by could very clearly see it. At this point, I called back into the shop and told them the house was very sketchy. If I didn't call back in 4 minutes to call me, if I didn't answer to call the cops. While I was on the phone, I took a chance to observe the house a little bit closer. I could see now that it looked extremely abandoned, not just in disrepair. The driveway itself was disintegrating. There were weeds growing out of the gravel, no mailbox, no trash can, no car, no landscaping, no toys. Absolutely nothing in the yard. It looked like it hadn't been mowed in years. With a closer look, I could see the roof was falling apart and the siding was falling apart as well. The back deck, which came around to the side, had almost disintegrated completely. The only part of the house that looked even a little bit decent was the allegedly non-functioning front door. The windows were all closed shut and all had the blinds and curtains drawn as well. A few were actually boarded up. I couldn't even see any electrical wiring running to this house. It wasn't dark completely, but it was dusk. There were no signs of any lights around. I was starting to get very nervous. I'm a 5'10" male and 108 dBs. I'm not in super great shape, but I'm not a complete wimp either. I'm not helpless, but I do try to avoid any sort of confrontation. I wasn't too concerned about getting robbed. No skin off my teeth. That's not my money anyway. What I was mostly worried about was getting jumped and killed. It was a fairly safe area, but recently there had been some more rather unsavory people moving in from the city. A big spike in home invasions and robberies. Even more worrying, a few stabbings and assaults as well. So I got out my phone and called the number they'd given the store when ordering. While I was doing that, I was also getting the pizza out and making sure to leave my door open. A running car half in the road and an abandoned house with the door wide open looks really suspicious, right? If stuff went down, at least it would look out of place enough to make someone stop. Not that there was any traffic this far down the road. I was starting to walk up to the house as the phone continued to ring. It rang twice, and then an automated message started to play. This number is associated with an internet texting app. The free ones you download that let you send free text from a different phone number over a data connection. I think it was Haywire or something. We'd had issues with people using numbers from those services for pranks in the past. This was a huge red flag. My heart was pounding in my throat and my whole body was telling me to bail. Still, I didn't want to get a reputation of being a flaky driver and lose any potential for future delivery shifts. That's why I did not bail yet. I'm just standing there holding the pizza, looking at this house, but not daring to venture around the back. I was hoping the resident would look out the window and come out by the road to get their food. I'm looking in through the front windows, checking for any signs of life. At this point, I see a blind pop up on one window next to the front door, and a really creepy-looking guy with a hat pulled over his face and huge sunglasses looking out. There was no reason for him to be wearing those. I could see a big guy standing right behind him in the room, too. When he saw me looking, he mouthed something and darted away, presumably toward the allegedly broken front door. At this point, I bolted out of there. I had stayed close to my car, so it was only a few steps away. I jumped into the driver's seat and threw the pizza into the passengers. That was something I would never really do. Since I was really good about keeping my car clean, I slammed into reverse before I even got the clutch all the way in. I grinded my gears a little. Again, something I never did. Without looking, I simultaneously slammed and locked my door and floored it backwards onto the main road. I didn't even check for cross traffic. Really stupid on my part. I started to drive away and looked back toward that house. The screen door on the outside of the front door was now open, but the front door was still shut. The guy wasn't out in the yard yelling or anything. He'd seemingly just disappeared. I pulled over a little ways up the road and called back to the shop. I told them I was fine, and I told them everything else when I got back. Those people never called back to inquire about their food. People will usually call irate if the pizza's 15 minutes late. These people never got it at all, so it's really strange they never called. Pretty much a confirmation they were up to no good. After telling the co-workers about it, they concluded it was definitely a robbery. At the very least, we put the address and phone number on our no deliveries list, and we all shared the pizza together. Now I doubt I would have gotten murdered or anything like that, maybe robbed, but it was still very unnerving. I easily could have gotten into some serious trouble just by doing my job, especially if the idiots took a slightly less abandoned house to stake out. I've had a few delivery jobs that have given me the creeps over the years. One or two that I was pretty sure I was about to be robbed, but these are just occupational hazards. Yeah, it sucks, but you get over it. Only one job has ever truly terrified me, one that scares me to think about even today. So we got an order from an address that none of us drivers had ever delivered to before. This normally causes some suspicion among us, since we're always pretty wary whenever delivering to a new address. A fair few first-time deliveries end up resulting in an address getting blacklisted immediately. Sometimes they just try to stiff you for money or scam to get a free pizza. Generally speaking, the drivers take turns delivering to a new address. And this time, it just so happened to be my turn. So once the order was completed and the pizzas were all boxed up, I took them out to the car and punched in the address to my navigation. It turns out the address was right at the very edge of our delivery area, pretty much right in the middle of absolute nowhere. It dawned on me that this could be the oldest trick in the book. Call the pizza in some hard-to-reach location, then demand it to be free once it takes more than 45 minutes to deliver. To my relief, though, I made it out to this old dirt road with plenty of time to spare. Yet my relief did not last long. At least not when I saw the state of the address I was supposed to be delivering to. The house was so run down, it looked like a squat, like it had been commandeered by the homeless as a place to avoid sleeping rough. There was a rusty old pickup in the driveway, its wheels askew from years of misuse. I mean, this place was the very definition of haunted house. Needless to say, I was not expecting a particularly generous tip. As I took the pizzas out from my passenger seat of the car, I started to hear this faint whining noise. My ears picked it up immediately, and I froze, trying to work out just what that sound was and where it could be coming from. I came to realize it was the sound of a violin being played. More accurately, the sound of a violin being played extremely badly. These discordant noises carried on as I walked up the dirt pathway toward the porch and the front door. The drag of some old violin bow across to draw old strings that were way out of tune was creepy, sure, but not what terrified me. When I knocked on the door, the screaming cat sound ceased instantly. A few moments of silence went by before I began to hear slow, heavy footsteps steadily growing closer. I can't be exactly certain, but I'm almost sure I could hear someone breathing on the other side. These heavy, labored breaths as I waited for the door to open. The silence was broken by a metallic snap of the door unlocking before hurried footfalls sounded on the other side. Someone had unlocked the door, then scampered away from it as if they were overly skittish about visitors. "Hello? I got your pizza order here," I remember calling out, feeling the tension rise once again as silence engulfed the scene. "Come on, mister." A childish voice came from the other side. I wanted to turn tail and run at this point, but returning to the pizza place without the money for the pizzas would definitely mean a verbal or written warning from my manager. I already had one for turning up late, and I couldn't afford another. Reluctantly, I took hold of the door handle, turned it, and walked inside. The interior of the house was completely bathed in darkness. Only a handful of weak oil lamps gave me any sense of the layout. There was a figure crouched on a nearby sofa, the old violin lying next to it. "There's $1.15 here on the table, mister." The person sounded like a child, but they looked much bigger. On the small, dusty coffee table right in front of the couch, there was a pile of change. Normally, I'd have taken issue with this, but to be honest, I was desperate to get out of there at that point. I'd have taken any form of currency. As soon as I stooped down to start sliding the pile of coins into my cupped palm, I started to hear labored breathing again. I dared not look toward that person. I could see their legs in my peripheral vision, but even then I could see how unnaturally long they were. This person was clearly not a child. "So sorry about the coins, mister. I saved them all up to afford this treat for myself. It's all I have." I told the person not to worry. In the sunniest disposition I could muster, the last thing I wanted to do was upset them. I pocketed the coins, barely having counted them at all. Geez, I'd come up with the difference myself if I needed to. I just wanted to get out of there. As I turned to leave, though hastily thanking the person for their purchase, I caught a glimpse of their face in the low light of the oil lamps. They were burned, horribly burned all the way up their arms and chest. The scarred flesh extended all the way up to their face and head. The person's only visible features were obscured by a small rubber mask. The mask didn't even cover their entire face, only a small central portion that concealed their eyes, nose, and mouth. It had a long wooden nose, kind of like Pinocchio. The small carved eyes were blank. I averted my gaze away from the mask. It was one of the most hideously sad and scary things I'd ever laid eyes on. Just as I reached the front door, I heard that same childlike voice emanating from right behind me. "Want to hear me play a song, mister?" Before I even had the chance to answer to tell them I was too busy, they grabbed the old violin next to them and began to whine out a tune. I rushed back to the driver's seat of my car. Before I could even say no, I was out. Scrambling to start the engine, I tried to make a quick getaway. I don't think the person had any intention of harming me, but something about that scene still creeps back into my mind when I lie there in the darkness, trying to go to sleep. Something that means I'll never, ever make another delivery. I'll quit before I have to go back to that house.